In the heart of Egypt, where the great Pharaoh ruled with an iron fist, an enslaved people cried out for freedom. The Israelites had been in bondage for centuries, and their suffering had reached the heavens. God heard their cries and sent Moses, a man once raised in Pharaoh's palace, to deliver a bold message. "Let my people go." But Pharaoh, arrogant and unyielding, laughed at the demand. "Who is this God that I should obey him?" he scoffed. And so, a great battle began, not of swords or armies, but of divine power against human pride. The first plague. Moses and his brother Aaron stood before Pharaoh at the Nile River. At God's command, Aaron raised his staff and struck the waters. Instantly, the river turned red as blood. The fish floated lifeless to the surface, their scales glistening under the sun. The stench of death filled the air, and the people could no longer drink from their once life-giving river. But Pharaoh's magicians mimicked the miracle using trickery, and Pharaoh hardened his heart. He refused to free the Israelites. The second plague. Then came the frogs. Not just in the river, but in homes, in beds, in ovens, and even in the very bowls from which the Egyptians ate. At first, Pharaoh pleaded with Moses to remove them, promising freedom. But when God took the frogs away, leaving heaps of their dead bodies rotting in the streets, Pharaoh broke his promise and refused to let the Israelites go. The third plague. Aaron struck the dust of the earth, and suddenly, gnats filled the air, tiny, biting creatures that swarmed over people and animals alike. This time, Pharaoh's magicians could not replicate the miracle. "This is the finger of God," they admitted. Yet still, Pharaoh's heart was hardened. The fourth plague. Swarms of flies. A dark buzzing filled the air. Thick swarms of flies invaded Egypt, covering everything, crawling into eyes, ears, and mouths. But something strange happened. While Egypt suffered, the land of Goshen, where the Israelites lived, remained untouched. "Let them go," Pharaoh shouted. But as soon as the flies were gone, he changed his mind. The fifth plague. Livestock die. A devastating sickness struck all the livestock of Egypt: horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, sheep, and goats. The Egyptians watched in horror as their animals collapsed, lifeless. Meanwhile, the Israelite herds remained unharmed. Still, Pharaoh refused. The sixth plague. Boils break out. Then came painful boils, oozing sores that covered every Egyptian from head to toe. Even Pharaoh's sorcerers, once so confident, could not stand before Moses because of the affliction. But Pharaoh clenched his jaw and hardened his heart once more. The seventh plague. Moses lifted his staff, and the sky darkened. Then, with a deafening roar, fire-laced hailstones rained down from the heavens, shattering homes, crushing crops, and killing all who were outside. Never before had Egypt seen such a storm. Pharaoh trembled. "I have sinned," he admitted. "Pray to your God, and I will let you go." But once again, when the skies cleared, Pharaoh changed his mind. The eighth plague. Locusts devour the land. A powerful wind blew across the desert, carrying a plague of locusts, millions upon millions of them. They devoured everything green: trees, plants, and any crops the hail had left standing. Egypt's land, once lush and fertile, became barren. Still, Pharaoh's stubbornness remained. The ninth plague. Darkness covers Egypt. For 3 days, an unnatural darkness fell over Egypt, a darkness so thick and oppressive that people could not move. The land was swallowed in despair. But in Goshen, where the Israelites lived, there was light. Pharaoh, now desperate, told Moses the Israelites could leave, but not with their livestock. Moses refused. Furious, Pharaoh shouted, "Get out of my sight. The day you see my face again, you will die." Moses, unshaken, replied, "You have spoken truly. I will never see your face again." The 10th plague. Death of the firstborn. Then came the final, most devastating plague. Moses warned Pharaoh, "At midnight, every firstborn son in Egypt will die, rich or poor, even Pharaoh's own son." But Pharaoh refused to listen. That night, as the Egyptians slept, a shadow passed through the land. The firstborn in every Egyptian home took their last breath. From the poorest servant to the mighty Pharaoh, no house was spared. A great wailing filled the air, cries of mothers, fathers, and siblings mourning their lost loved ones. But in the homes of the Israelites, Not a single child was harmed. They had followed God's command. They sacrificed a spotless lamb and painted its blood on their doorposts. The plague passed over them, sparing their children. Shattered by grief, Pharaoh could resist no longer. "Leave," he commanded. "Take your families, take your animals, and go. But bless me also." And so, after 430 years of slavery, the Israelites marched out of Egypt, a nation freed by the power of God. Little did Pharaoh know, he would soon chase after them, only to meet his own destruction at the bottom of the Red Sea. But that is another story.